Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Kathy Flaherty, a principal at Matthews, Carter and Boyce. For the past 78 years, MCB has been honored to be a trusted guide, providing sophisticated business advisory services, audit and assurance, tax planning and compliance, outsourced accounting, and employee benefit plan consulting. We've earned a reputation for doing more than just keeping the books and have become known as strong, proactive partners dedicated to our clients, our employees, and our community. And we invest in helping each adapt and grow. Thank you for joining us today. We've been hosting our Women in Business events for several years and have presented on a variety of timely topics. We're excited about today's event and helping women position themselves for personal and professional growth at every career stage. First, a couple of logistic items. The presentation will be a conversation format where my colleague, Sarah DeVoe, will ask the panelists a series of questions and they will share their insights. We have allotted time at the end for a Q&A, so please submit your questions via the chat feature during the presentation. I'm delighted to introduce our featured speakers, Christy Dean, CEO of KL Dean, and Kate Bates, President and CEO of the Arlington Chamber of Commerce. I will now turn the program over to Sarah.
Thank you, Kathy. Let's get started with each of our panelists introducing themselves, and Christy, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Dean, founder and CEO of KL Dean and Associates, a recruiting and talent advisory firm. Before I tell you a little bit about my career journey, I want to thank everyone for being here, and I'm really excited about the conversation we're about to have. Something that has guided me in every step of my career has been, if you are happy at work, you are happy at life. So I just want that to sort of be my theme, our theme. It sounds simple, but it's shaped every career decision I have ever made, the bold, the unexpected, the scary ones. I've been in the workforce for 30 years and began my career in the banking industry, starting out as a branch sales rep at M&T Bank, working my way up to vice president of the business banking division. After 13 years, I made a bold move and I started a dog walking business. I resigned. One day I saw my dog being walked just by a dog walker and decided I'm not happy at work. I want to be happy in life. So we'll talk about the why a little bit later, possibly. A few years down the road, the government shut down. And I started working with a friend of mine as her VP of business development in the recruiting world. And, that changed everything for me. I fell in love with recruiting. Fast forward to the COVID pandemic, like many of us, it was a time of reflection. What do I do next? Our industry happened to be hit a bit, and our team scattered around, but I continued with recruiting. And my services are talent acquisition, leadership development, succession planning, where I really do help organizations and people thrive. I'm very passionate about supporting women in the workforce, especially when I lean on my banking experience and learned very early on in my career, as a woman, navigating how challenging navigating career growth, being heard and valued in environments maybe that weren't always designed for women in mind. So I'm excited to have the conversation today and delve a bit more into that, because the people of any company are the heart of an organization, as our, so I'm looking forward to the conversation to talk about insight, stories, and strategies. So on to you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kate Bates. I'm president and CEO of the Arlington Chamber of Commerce. We're a membership organization of about 650 businesses that span all sizes and all sectors, and proudly includes Matthews, Carter, and Boyce. So thank you all for your partnership there as well. So I've been with the Chamber for a little over 18 years. I've been CEO for 11 years. The organization has been around since 1924. I'm only the fifth CEO or top staff leadership role, which has been called different things over the years, and I'm the first woman in the role. So that's been a really unique and wonderful experience as well. Prior to joining the Chamber, I was with an organization called Women in Government, and we worked with women state legislators primarily on issues related to healthcare and education, which at the time and still to some extent today, primarily are the top committees that women serve on in those bodies. So again, I'm incredibly passionate about this topic and really appreciate the opportunity for the partnership and discussion today. I'll get into it a little bit more later in the program, but the Chamber has a really great women in business program that has been formed under my leadership as CEO, which actually we didn't do initially because there was a program that was founded by two of our members that was already going on. Two small business owners ran a wonderful program called Awesome Women Entrepreneurs, which was really for supporting fellow women small business owners and entrepreneurs. And we didn't want to be redundant or really compete with their efforts, that they had that market really, really well served. And then they actually approached me about their succession plan. One was moving into her grandmother's stage of life, and the other was really just focused more on her business. And they were ready to pass that over. And they felt like, given the culture of the Chamber and our leadership here, that we would be a good home for them. And that's been really incredible. It's been about 5 years. We've been able to take that program and keep the core, really the community, the values of that group, but really expand it to include entrepreneurs, but also executives and women from larger businesses as well. And really forming that sense of community has been incredibly powerful. Again, we say often, we love all of our members and all of our events, but there's something special about those women in business events where people really come with the mentality of, how do they help and support each other? So you see a lot of really amazing informal mentorship and a lot of support, really building that community as well. So again, these spaces are incredibly powerful, and not just given what's going on in the world these days, but we still get questions about, why do you have a women in business programming? Why do women need this extra support? And I think conversations like this can be really informative to help really make sure that everybody understands the need for, as well as the importance of, these programs.
Great. Well, thank you, Christy and Kate. I am excited to hear what you have to say about these questions that we've got queued up for you. So let's kick it off. The pandemic and current uncertain economic landscape have accelerated the leaky pipeline, as it's being called, which is where women and more women progressively are being lost at each advancing career stage. What have you seen in your work or in your circle in terms of external factors that women are facing today as they attempt to advance and grow in their careers? And we'll start it off with Christy.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. I have a recent example when we were, preparing for the panel. Being in the recruiting industry, I work with a lot of family-owned and operated construction companies. And there was a situation where they had an opening for an accounting manager and had a slam dunk candidate, amazing. She worked remotely, again, because we all know COVID did pivot a lot of folks to working from home, which obviously very appealing. And the child care issue definitely was brought up when we were talking to the company and my client. The good news is, even though the client had not been into the remote piece, because with construction, a lot of folks were essential employees and they already had to go into the, to the office. It was about meeting in the middle. My candidate was really kind of focused on the child care, working from home. The cost would be about $9,000 additional a year if she went into the office. So the conversation was there where the client was very creative. They wanted to attract top talent and decided to do a hybrid remote. So amazing that they were able to meet in the middle. It wasn't full remote. And then on the flip side, there's other situations where it's not necessarily an issue for women. Men are now also looking for potential paternity leave. So I do want to bring that up, because what I'm noticing is the conversation and dialogue is changing. Obviously, primarily women have been the main caregiver, but things are changing, and companies do need to get a little bit more competitive, whether it's men seeking paternity leave, or juggling the the child care. How do we make it work? How do we get creative? But it has to be a win-win for both parties. So that's a recent example from a recruiting standpoint. And
Great. I'm happy to chime in as well. So, I mean, the leaky pipeline is absolutely real that, again, despite as much as we've made progress, women tend to still be the primary caregivers in most family arrangements. And women tend to leave as those career demands intersect with caregiving responsibilities. However, I do want to acknowledge that really it's important to support whatever choices that women make in that. There are some women who choose to take a career pause and want to have that time home, typically with young children, but sometimes it's caring for older family members or could be a variety of reasons. But I think it's really important that we respect, again, all choices, regardless of where they are, and really support, again, whatever it is that women and all individuals want for their family. On the other flip side of things, so, I have a toddler at this point. So again, I was, CEO when, it was because the chamber had never had a female CEO, they had certainly never had a pregnant CEO before. And again, that was a whole situation for me to manage. I was very fortunate to have a very supportive board and a very supportive board chair who actually had been a female CEO when she had her son as well. But, I got pressure in the other direction where, I run a very small organization. Again, we don't have FMLA based on our size. And, there's just not really that infrastructure here. So, I did 4 weeks out for my maternity leave, and that was something I was comfortable with. Again, our family structure allowed that. We were able to find great childcare for my daughter. But I got a lot of pressure and a lot of questions on, oh, are you coming back? Are you coming back full time? That I really had to manage that in terms of how I communicated my plan. And from the very beginning, I, had a leave coverage plan that I rolled out when, I rolled out the news, both my executive committee and, my board of 50, but got a lot of pressure and questions from individuals as well. And that's something, again, that I don't think people think about as part of this, is that it's balancing that, creating that flexibility for caregiving, but not assuming that a woman's not going to be able to do her job just because she has a child. So I think that's really important messaging to balance as well. So it's a piece of the leaky pipeline, but it's also, again, respecting women and all individuals as the professionals that we are, and trusting us to be able to make the right decisions that are best for our organizations as well as for our families as well.
Those are some really interesting points, Kate, about, like you said, every woman might have a different plan of, what that looks like for her, and childcare and the cost of childcare. And Christy, some great points from you as well about how this conversation is changing and really bringing men into it. As far as some of these roadblocks of, these challenges, these questions that women get as they're navigating these changes in their lives, and the cost of childcare. What are some ways, do you have any advice as to how women can manage these roadblocks and overcome them? And Kate, we'll start with you.
Sure. So again, I think, a lot of people are looking for some flexibility in their role and with their schedule. I think that, again, it's very important to be aware of what the functions of your individual role at your company are, and asking for things that are within that. Again, I run a very small organization, but I'll use us as an example that, we have different remote options for different roles. The person who's my operations manager, who sits at the front desk, he knows, and he knew when we hired him, that's a 5 days a week in office job. There's not remote for that role. Some of our other functions you can do more remotely, like planning our events. Yes, you have to be on site for the events and for some other things as well, but that role has some more flexibility. So I think it's important to look at things from your employer's perspective as well as your own perspective, and make sure that those requests are within bounds. And I think that, culture has really shifted post-COVID, where people are understanding of that. And again, it's about, as Christy talked about with her client, it's about finding someone who can excel in the role. And there are certainly roles that you can do remote, partially remote, primarily remote, but making sure that you fully understand, the job functions. For example, my membership team, a lot of their work is meeting in person. Neither of those roles could be fully remote, and the individuals in that fully understand that, roles that have evening responsibilities, just making it clear, what the core tenets of your job are, and that when you're asking for that flexibility, it's in alignment with the goals of your employer as well. And I think that makes it a lot easier for them to be able to say yes. And again, really carving some time to really build your network out as well. That's something else you can do to figure out how to navigate these roadblocks. Finding mentors of, any gender as well, that can really help you problem solve and work through some of these things to help you really meet those personal and professional goals that you have for yourself as well. Childcare, again, we could go into probably for its own whole webinar, but I'll do a little bit of teaser here. Again, this is a huge barrier for families, especially families of young children. Again, I think most people know this, but you cannot work from home and watch children at the same time. You are not serving your job. You are not serving your children either. However, remote work can provide some benefits in terms of childcare as it pertains to commuting time as well. Again, there's a lot of misconceptions. I even had a peer who, when I said I was working like 1 to 2 days a week remote, they said, "Oh, so your daughter's at home." It's like, absolutely not. I'm working. That's not how that works. But things like, it's silly, but we can talk about it here on a Women in Business event. Many of us choose to, but with some societal pressures, do our hair, do our makeup, worry about our outfits. I look in my household at the amount of time it takes me to get ready versus my husband, and there's definitely a disparity there. And if I have a remote day where I don't have any on-camera meetings, that is time that I get back there in that day. So it's realizing and managing those expectations as well. Childcare. So Arlington is the most expensive place in the country for childcare. We are proud of so many of our accolades of, fittest city, LGBTQ friendly, all these amazing, amazing stats we have. Great place for young professionals. We are not proud of our childcare stat, but that is an issue that the Chamber and the business community are really taking head on. We've recently launched our Arlington Childcare Alliance to help combat this. Right now, we're working on a pilot program that supports family in-home providers. So these are really what we call the market-based affordable solutions that often cost about half the price of centers and sometimes provide some increased flexibility. A number of them are open evenings and unconventional hours as well. But we are working on larger scale projects for things like backup care, sick care, things that we know really impact women and all individuals who are parents in the workforce and therefore their employers as well.
I'd like to add to the roadblocks, if I may also, and you Kate did great with that. It's all about alignment, and you have to figure out what is the roadblock. Is there a role mismatch or how you're doing the job? Is there leadership misalignment, and then company culture? So, if I draw back from my banking days, this is the why I started my dog walking business. My father actually was going through cancer and a life or death situation. And at the time, the leader that I reported to was more focused on the sales numbers. And I had all this paid time off, after 13 years. I'm like, can I just take a day here and a day there? But it was all about taking, the family medical leave because knowing the numbers weren't going to be hit. So yeah, I mean, I probably could have found some other ways. I'm not saying go resign by any means from your job, but having the conversation with leadership and how can I get this job done? Maybe, this was back in the 2013. So when the situation happened, or sorry, 2008. But it's all about alignment. How can you get the job done? I also had a great leader during that time frame. I had foot surgery, complications. My boss at the time said, "Hey, you can work from home. Here's some special projects to keep me engaged." So whether it's childcare, family care, I think we as women, we need to be our own advocate. We need to be clear on our goals and find, like you said, the sponsors, the mentors, because yes, you have to be your advocate, but you also takes a team to support you as well to get you to that, to navigate the roadblocks. So it's about navigating, because they might not be removed, and it's about the middle ground ultimately, but communication, alignment, and not losing your core values. If it's a child care situation, you're raising your kids. I know many of my good friends who maybe became stay-at-home moms or are re-entering the workforce. So how do we create positions, for folks to re-enter? But it's about supporting, a support system ultimately.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point as well that, again, that's where culture really comes in, that there's policies and then there's how they play out. So, again, I know that a lot of companies have switched to more flexible policies, but it can't be one of those things that on paper it says X, but really you're not going to get this opportunity of X, Y, and Z. Again, it's been far enough removed. I can say, during my time at Women in Government, again, while the office closed at 5, if you were out before 5:45 or 6, you were getting a look and a question of like, oh, what do you have going on this evening? Again, so it's about what's on paper as the policies, but a lot of it is also about the culture. And that's where, again, everyone in leadership, regardless of gender, can play a really important role in leading by example with their team and making sure that, again, the reality of what you're living out in your culture matches what those goals are through your policies as well.
Yeah, good advice both for the business and the individual.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the idea of, figuring out problems and how to solve those problems, and especially like figuring out what the roadblock is, right? Because sometimes we think we know what the roadblock is, and it's actually something a little bit different. That was a really great point. So what are some other strategies that women can use to position themselves for opportunity and growth? Christy?
Sure. I mean, it's about communicating. I'm gonna again go back to my banking days. Early on in my career, I was in a market where there just wasn't some opportunity for me. I was branch sales rep, and I knew I was going to have to leave the area. I was actually from Southern Maryland, and they had a couple branches. So I knew if I wanted to climb the banking corporate ladder, I was going to really need to find the right people to help me do that. So Bill Cole, he was my first boss, and I said, "Hey, I love what I'm doing. I want more, and I will move to Baltimore." So got my first apartment, made the move. I'm not saying, some people can't make a move. You might not be able to relocate, but it's just pretty much going after it. Coincidentally, that during the holidays, my dad gave me a book that said, "Don't wait for your ship to come in. Go out and swim to it." So I still have that book. It's right here, guys. I'll show you right here. If you can see it. But anyway, it's about making the opportunity, making something happen for yourself if you can't do it yourself. Bill was awesome. He was a great mentor. Another situation was as I continued on and kind of climbing the banking corporate ladder, one of my mentors and bosses, Lori, she was stretched kind of thin, and she knew I was ready for that next step, to retain me and not maybe go to another bank or a competitor. Created a position to kind of help her because she had a family, young kids, and she's like, I'm a little stressed right now, but how do we make this a win-win ultimately? So it was about brainstorming. I had to compete. And what I will say is it's really hard. I find it's hard for myself, and I think women in general, to promote yourself. So I knew I was going to be up against my peers. I was going to be up against my managers who were managing me. Went into the interview prepared with data. Why should I have this job? You have to be confident. It can be hard sometimes, but you got to bring the data. The good news is I ended up getting the job. It was an area sales manager, up and down, from Cecil County on down to Southern Maryland. Lori took her piece, the Western Frederick area. But we came up with a solution. So that's what I would say. It's about your strategy should always have a solution. You got to put yourself out there, open communication, seek out advocates, mentors, and like you said, Kate, earlier, men and women, right? Because it can work both ways. Some women could be threatened by women, some men can be threatened by women, but it's about being aligned with the right folks that have your core values and not being afraid to ask. It's okay to ask for the support, and just kind of create those opportunities. Even when I had the dog walking business and the government shut down, I reached into my friend and said, "Look, government's been shut down for a whole month." This was, I think, back in 2013. And we're just coming off of another shutdown here. But I realized I probably needed a plan B. The dog walking was great. Didn't see that I wouldn't have revenue every week. People were walking their dogs from home because I had a lot of federal employees as my clients. So I pitched becoming the business development person for my friend's recruiting firm. And I think you just have to put yourself out there and not be afraid to do it. So if that kind of helps sharing some of my examples.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that Christy said. That again, I hate to stereotype, but women tend to not be great at advocating for ourselves. We tend to be really great at advocating for others, but remembering to be that champion for yourself as well, and to have confidence and to know your value. And a lot of it too of, how to position yourself for opportunity. It's, the same thing it is for everyone. It's work hard and keep asking for more. I mean, I remember years ago, the head of the time of economic development, our partner who we work with Arlington County, said to me, I know what your secret is. It's how hard you work. And I mean, that's how simple it comes down to it, that, anybody with the drive and aspirations, I genuinely believe can exceed and hit whatever their career goals may be, knowing that those are different for everyone. So it's that balance of that hard work and taking on more, in my situation. And Sarah actually knew my predecessor and was involved with the chamber then. But, my predecessor was 71 at the time he retired, and he was really slowing down and taking some steps back. And again, it was combination opportunity and necessity that there were times when, if other roles would turn over, like I would end up taking on more. I would end up taking on things for my predecessor. So I learned how to read financial statements. I learned how to do all of these things. I ended up taking on more external responsibilities as well. So a lot of it, it's the same career advice to anybody it's people say young person, but it's not just about age. It's anybody who's looking to advance in their career, regardless of age. It's to say yes to things, to see what the problems are, see what challenges, especially your leadership and your direct supervisor have, the way Christy said, and how can you make their lives a little bit easier? How can you solve one of those challenges and really position yourself that way as well? Also want to, again, expand upon something else Christy said about, again, making sure that women are supporting each other. That's incredibly important and not something that can be taken for granted. And really, whether you had the opportunities and support yourself or not, trying to create those opportunities for others. Again, mention that an incredibly supportive board chair when I announced that I was pregnant. And, I told her, thank you. You've been incredible. Anytime people had questions, is Kate leaving? I had made it clear with her that was not my plan. She just was the fiercest, most amazing advocate and really made it very clear that we were aligned, had a great plan, and now, a couple of years have passed and it's been all completely seamless. But I asked her, I said, how can I thank you? And she said, pay it forward to the next person. And that's what I've been trying to do. We've not had any employees of our small team become pregnant during that time, but we have had, without sharing, anything confidential, we've had an employee who had some family things going on, which necessitated some more flexibility. And I would go to them and say, I know what's going on. You don't need to be, why don't you take time out for these appointments? And they were kind of the ones pushing back saying, no, I don't want this to be unfair to others. And I explained, everybody has their own arrangement. You're getting your work done. What's going on is not your fault. We want to keep you here. Here is a path forward to that. And I know that was really appreciated. And I think all of us having that mindset, really, again, those of us in leadership positions, to be appreciative of the privilege that comes with that and the opportunity that we can create for others as well. Again, all in that win-win mindset. Unfortunately, if you are, a charge nurse at a hospital, you can't provide that same flexibility for, the nurses on the shift who have to be there. But for a lot of us who do office-based work, realizing what sort of flexibility we can provide and taking advantage of that as well.
Yeah, the win-win is always a good argument, right? If we can make a business case for why this type of flexibility actually, works for the employee and the employer, it's usually a win-win, and there's, no reason not to, right? Yeah. And I also really like the idea of, the communication and knowing your own strengths and advocating for yourself and putting yourself in a situation where your strengths can really shine. So to that end, what are some tips for increasing our profiles and growing as thought leaders in our respective industries? Kate?
Sure. So again, a shameless promotion, get involved with the chamber, Arlington Chamber or your local chamber. If you're not doing business in Arlington, you don't have to be physically residing either personally or professionally in Arlington to get involved with us. But chambers and other trade associations are a great way to, again, raise your profile, to have some leadership opportunities that you may or may not get at your company. We have members of our board and of our committee leadership who are leaders in their companies. But we also, especially on the committee level, there can be opportunities for people to really build those leadership chops there as well. I know Christy has a lot of experience on the trade association front as well. That find those external opportunities to really raise your profile and to create those, and also to meet other people within your industry, meet other partners. If you're an employee with Matthews, Carter and Boyce, there could be, a network of not just accountants, but maybe attorneys and bankers who could be great referral partners for you as well, that can kind of help you bring in that business and raise your career profile. And that's where the chamber or more general business groups can really come in. Something that I'm not great about, but try to be better about really for the chamber rather than my own profile, is again, we have these amazing tools with LinkedIn. Whether you love or hate social media, personally, I think LinkedIn is a great professional platform to really establish yourself as a thought leader, sharing things, publishing articles as well, posting about what you're doing. What I don't do, but really should, and I would encourage you all to do, you could bucket time on your calendar for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, once a week, maybe even once every other week, once a month if you're starting out. But that's a great way to get things out there as well. There's also a lot of other advisory boards, whether it's within your local government or jurisdiction, or things within your trade association, within your company. If you're a larger business, be the one who signs up for a little bit more, and you'll really broaden your network and your opportunities that way as well.
I'll add just a few things. My number one is be authentic. Because words from the heart hit the heart always. And if you're going to find a cause, and just be authentic, number one, exclamation point. Share insights, like you said, accomplishments. It's okay. You don't want to come across, just promoting yourself the wrong way, but if you're authentic about it and genuine, it's gonna strike a chord with folks. Mentoring younger women, I'm doing that now myself. Pay it forward, like you said. College girls are looking for jobs right now. Some of my niece's friends, and it's like, let's have coffee. Pay it forward. You don't have to pay me. You owe me nothing. Let's just kind of mentor, coach. And I think it's teaching the younger generation of women to be confident also. Joining the construction industry is a hot button for me. A lot of my clients are family-owned and operated construction firms, the National Association for Women in Construction. They have a national chapter and local chapters. They are all about empowering women. And not sure if we have anyone out there in the construction industry who's in attendance. 11% of the workforce are women. This is a huge industry that you can either pivot into because folks are aging out. So look for those opportunities. Whether if you're not happy and aligned in a certain industry, the construction is booming right now. And then joining, it's about alignment and people that are going to resonate with you and share those core values. Again, going back to being authentic, traveling with winners, so to speak, leads to the road of fulfillment. And there is missteps. I've made plenty during the 13 years at the bank, maybe didn't align with the teams maybe that didn't hold my core values. Love teams that did have the core values. So I think if you're going to be a thought leader, just staying true to yourself would be a message I'd like to leave with folks.
Yeah, being authentic, definitely, that resounds with me. And I know one of the core tenets in sort of networking and business development has always been, people want to do business with people they like and trust. And so I think being authentic gets you really far on that front.
People want people in general, right? Normally, especially people you like.
Right.
And that's where, the power of, again, even in the area where everything went virtual, the power of those in-person events where you can really form those connections. Like, yes, I've only met Christy online. I do feel like we already have a connection now from meeting twice, but it would be 10 times better if we actually sat down together in a room. So that's where I really encourage, again, whether it's the chamber's events, whether it's a trade association, if you're at a large company, your own company's events, it can be hard, especially if you're balancing, young kids or caregiving of, oh, this is another evening, this is time away from family, but really it's time away from exercise or whatever your personal priorities are. But really forming those in-person relationships are where the authenticity can really come through in ways that are different than your LinkedIn profile, or again, just even Zoom communications as well.
All right, well, switching gears a little bit. So government-wide cuts, layoffs in the public and private sectors, the current jobs landscape, other economic factors have created, to say the least, great uncertainty. And this has exacerbated some of the challenges that companies are facing in managing their employees' growth and well-being. So how can women best approach their employers with suggestions for fostering inclusivity and operating with transparency, creating a more supportive work environment that prioritizes mentoring and career advancement? Christy?
Sure. I mean, it's the one-on-ones. I remember having breakfast meetings with my boss at the time, just talking about my short-term, long-term goals. What's the goal? So I mean, it's that human dimension. Those, working remotely, you do lose out on that to some degree. So you have to be more creative if folks are working remotely, whether it's a virtual or Zoom, but having one-on-ones, your individual development plan. What's it look like? It's okay to ask for the raise. I would say every raise I had at the bank, I either asked for it or, I mean, not that it's about the money, but I mean, sometimes, yeah, it's the bottom line. I mean, that's part of it. But being your own advocate, having clarity on what your goals are, being solution oriented, collaborating. The story about my candidate who, look, she had 2 young kids. She fit well into the company's long-term plan and they really wanted her. It was the here and now that she was struggling with. So it was just sort of being upfront with, hey, this is what I need now. It's not forever. And kind of that middle ground, and transparency and communication, I would say, have been important. And that's what I'm seeing now with whether it's an employee I'm representing or the employer. It's just that open communication. What's the business strategy? I said earlier in my intro, the people are the heart of the business. We bring the brand to life. It's got to be a win-win at the end of the day, right? Companies, they do have policies, they do have their bottom line, but you have to have a conversation about the solutions and how can everyone benefit one another, right? Because if people are happy and they feel valued, that's important. If they're leveraging their strengths, and there are opportunities and you're having conversations around that, companies are going to be able to retain and attract top talent. Organizations are going to thrive, and then people are going to be happier. Hence, the happy work, happy life. Write that down. So.
I think that's great, Christy. And again, to the point about pay, again, this might not be the economic climate to necessarily be going for the big raise, depending on who your employer is and what their situation is. But I do think it's worth noting there is still a huge pay disparity. The most recent information I saw from Brookings said even accounting for education as well as roles, that women are still making 85% of what men do in comparable roles with comparable education. So I think that's something that's important for, again, people of all genders to be mindful of as well when making compensation decisions. To some of those other areas for the question, again, it is a depressing landscape a little bit the way Sarah laid it out, which is kind of the reality of where we are in our region, especially right now, that, we're in a different situation where, during COVID, we had the federal government as a bit of a backstop. Right now, the federal government decisions have had an economic impact on our area that does rely so much on the federal government. Of course, it's government employees and it's contractors, but it's also a variety of industries, and especially our small small businesses. That's where we see things a lot as people prepare for economic downturn or live in an economic downturn right now. We see, our restaurant numbers are way down, restaurants are closing, individuals that work for those businesses are struggling as well. Excuse me. So realizing the climate where we're in, really encourage people to bring solutions to their employer and to their leadership team, whether it's how you think you can solve a challenge that the company has, or if it's coming with an ask for, you need some greater flexibility, come with a full plan of here's what I'd like, here's how it's going to work, and here's how, again, it's going to be seamless from your point of view as the company and as the employer. And again, that makes it a lot easier for your leadership to get to yes.
We also have some questions here about more specifically getting to that leaky pipeline theme that we kind of led here with, and some of the statistics, not quite statistics, but like Kate mentioned, with the current economic landscape and how this area is really feeling it. But in particular, working mothers who help drive a lot of the job market post-pandemic comeback are now leaving the workforce in large numbers, which is a big turnaround. The share of working mothers ages 25 to 44 with young children has fallen nearly every month this year to the lowest level in more than 3 years. Mm-hmm. How should we as business leaders in our community work together to address and reverse this trend? And I'm going to start with Kate because I know she's already kind of alluded to the Arlington Child Care Alliance.
Absolutely. So, childcare needs to be quality, accessible, and affordable. And I think that's what we can do systemically, where then it is up to individuals to make the decision. They may still choose to take time off from their career to spend time with their young children, and that is absolutely okay. But for those who are limited, I've had friends who had situations where they continuing in their job would cost more for their family than them staying at home. I have a very good friend who has twins who are now 7. When they were born, she worked in the nonprofit sector. They ran the math and daycare wasn't going to make sense. So she had to switch, and she switched into a government contracting job because that was the only way that they could make the math work for them. No, we're not going to be able to completely overhaul pay structures at every industry as well. But that's where, if we can help make childcare more accessible and affordable while keeping the great quality, that's where we're giving women and all individuals the option. And that's really where we can move the needle there as well. Again, talked about in the beginning that our work with some of these in-home providers who are all amazing licensed providers, a lot of them don't think of themselves as businesses. So they don't have the same marketing infrastructure that the larger centers have. So making sure that, again, we are helping connect these these businesses of these childcare providers with individuals in the community, both, employers, employees, and just individual citizens. If you go, on our website, I think we'll share at the end, we've let some of the providers opt into a referral network that lists information. A lot of them chose to list their rates as well, because that's really hard to find. And we are working right now with the county and with the state for really all of Northern Virginia. Fingers crossed, within a couple months, we should be rolling out a tool that the chamber is supporting that's really led by the state with our Ready region, they call it, of those working in the childcare space, that will make it so much easier for people to find a licensed childcare provider and have all of the information that they would need to make those decisions about it. Also, again, it's at the public policy level. So at the state level in Virginia, it'd be different in DC and Maryland. DC has universal pre-K. That's huge. Virginia does not have universal pre-K. So that's part of when you look at that statistic on why Arlington is the most expensive place in the country, is because when you average it out they usually do an infant and then a 4-year-old, and we don't have that coverage, and so providing that large systemic change really moves it back into the shift where things can be choices for individuals.
Christy, do you have anything to add for that?
No, I guess I would add just from my recruiting business, it's about the conversation again with your either future employer or current employer. We've rolled out experience surveys to a lot of our clients to see what the hot buttons are for certain folks. If it's, especially with women re-entering the workforce, or if they're leaving because it's, just not sustainable to manage both. Just sort of finding the companies that are progressive and are, in front of this issue. It's a full-time job looking for a new job, but they're out there. They are out there where they will support you. I always joke that recruiting is just like dating. It's about vetting the right match. So
Mhm.
that is and it goes back to misalignment, right? So
Mhm.
a leadership team is not supporting you. Is that really the company you want to work for?
Mhm.
And I know things are evolving, but you kind of want everyone to fall in love with each other. Just like my client fell in love with my candidate, and we met in the middle somehow. So,
Mhm.
it was at first no remote to hybrid remote to this person. We see this person 5, 10, 15 years down the road, potentially as the controller of the company. So, you got to just have that mindset, maybe that
Mhm.
short-term and long-term solutions potentially, but finding the right company that you want to align with.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think it's harder, again, as we've seen the economy shift, where immediately post COVID, again, in our area, people were struggling to get enough qualified individuals for positions. And now, with, again, recent federal government as well as federal contractor layoffs, we've seen layoffs in a lot of commercial businesses that don't do business with the government. Again, things are shifting a little bit more. So it makes it harder for individuals who are seeking jobs to ask for more. But that's really where that alignment comes in, Christy, as you described it, that, there's a lot of places where, and it's the same thing, it's a little more harsh, but the cost of, turning over an apartment, if you're in the real estate space, oh my goodness, the cost of turning over an employee and what that is for an employer, nobody wants to do that. Everybody, even from a pure business perspective, let alone a personal perspective, wants to be able to keep great employees with them. And so really providing those opportunities and building that loyalty with the right individuals as well is really, really that win-win-win for everybody's long-term success.
You've both given us a lot of great insights already, but do you have any other actionable tips or advice that you would like to share to help women who maybe feel the hurdles are too great to overcome as they are striving to create their dream career path?
I mean, I know we said it in passing, but really find some mentors and advocates and friends. Again, it can be a formal mentor or it can be an informal mentor. And you can have different mentors for different things. Maybe there's one particular area where you're looking to grow. Maybe you want to do more public speaking and you see somebody either at your company or in the community that does a lot of that. Reach out to them about that. Have that other person who you can talk to about more the personal professional balance of things. But don't be afraid to reach out and ask for that help and support. And really, again, I know we have a lot of leaders on this call as well. Try to seek out those people who you can help and support along the way and really what you can learn from. Again, this next generation coming up through the workforce is looking for much more flexibility than previous generations have, and figuring out, what can we all learn from them and how are they going to shape the future of work, and being open really to that two-way learning as well. I think that cultures really have shifted where it's not the people on the verge of retirement who are setting all the standards, that really it's shifted to a much more collaborative culture as well.
Yeah, I just read something about reverse mentoring. Uh,
Mhm.
Actually, my nephew worked for me a few years ago, and during the summer, I learned a lot from him. I mean, he was
Mhm.
high school going into college at the time, but did a couple internships. So yeah, it's the reverse mentoring, I think is the terminology. But
Mhm.
I totally echo what you're saying, Kate.
So you both mentioned having personal short-term and long-term career goals and plans. How often would you recommend reviewing that plan and going over it with a mentor if you are lucky enough to have found a mentor that you trust? Christy?
Sure, it's funny you mentioned that because yeah, 30 years in to the workforce, I still have a mentor. I kind of know when I need it. I know when I'm kind of going sideways a little bit. But I would say, I mean, definitely every 6 months we're connecting myself. I realized the business was growing in a big way and I didn't have any employees. So I was like, I need help figuring this out. I felt like I was in an island. So just surrounded myself with, a coach, because you do have to invest in yourself. You have to be willing to do that. And then also a mentor who sort of is a friend, but also we're very business minded as well. But I'd say at least twice a year, she and I are connecting. And then once a quarter, I'm trying to hold myself accountable, with the coach to sort of sit down. I mean, that's just me. I think everyone's going to be different. If it's not scheduled, it's not going to happen. But usually my internal system kind of knows when I'm ready to have a heart to heart.
Yeah, I was going to suggest quarterly as well. Again, some of it depends on what your goals are. Again, if there is a very tangible, if you're up for a promotion at your company that you want to get in the next year, you might need to do some self accountability at least monthly. But if, again, you're looking at more broad, long term, I think a self check in quarterly is a great cadence. And again, like Christy, I'd say put it on your calendar. It's the same thing. We all get so busy that we have to worry about what's right in front of us, that those big picture items really only get tackled if you dedicate that specific time to them.
Yeah, if too much time passes, you always have to have some action items. Like I referenced the breakfast meeting. I was in retail banking, thinking about getting into commercial banking. So I would have a breakfast meeting, every few months just to figure out, is this where I'm headed? Am I going to go through commercial credit training or not? I'd get assignments to figure out and projects to figure out if that was where I wanted to be. Long story short, I did not. I didn't get into the middle market world of business of commercial banking. I stayed in business banking, but it's those exercises that'll give you action items, along the way, like the one-on-ones with your current boss. Um, once a
And
month.
it's funny, I shared a very similar message actually to our Jobs Shadow students just a couple weeks ago. But I think it's true for people in all stages of careers that knowing what you don't want to do is just as valuable as knowing what you do want to do. So again, kind of viewing that Bob Ross happy accident, philosophy, that if you do take on a project or something and realize, wow, I don't want to be doing this at all, that's a great lesson too. By doing that short-term project, you save yourself from moving into a whole role that again is going to be misaligned for you.
There's some great points about maybe not always the obvious career path being, or the obvious next step being the right step for you, and sort of trusting your gut and leaning on your mentors to help you out there. So I have one more question, and then I think we have a few more minutes. We can open it up to the audience if there's any questions. So to our viewers, if you want to go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat, we'll take a look at those. But you've already mentioned some initiatives and some resources that are out there for women, similar to MCB's Women in Business webinars. We've got the Chamber of Commerce. Christy's mentioned the Construction Women's Group. Is there anything else that we should be taking advantage of?
So I'd love to dive in a little more. So within our Women in Business series, so we have every other month networking events. They're very informal. We do a short program and an exercise where everybody quickly gets to know who everybody in the room is, so you can make a new connection that way as well. And those are amazing community building events. I know we're going to send a link to the next one afterwards. And we've got a promo code of MCB, so everybody gets access to the member rate, which is super affordable and reasonable. So we have that as an opportunity. We also have some really great educational programming. We have our annual Women in Business Summit, which is an in-person event, with keynote speakers, breakout panels, and really great discussions and really great opportunities to build community. And again, these spaces, there really is something special about them, and it is open to all gender identities, but it's with a focus on women in business. And people just tend to show up with the most authentic versions of themselves. And it's a really great opportunity for connection and growth as well.
Anything to add, Christy?
No, I mean, I'm fired up about the construction industry. So if anyone's out there looking to pivot, they really are empowering women. They've got an event coming up for the holidays in the DC area. So, look at NAWIC DC chapter 67, actually, it's what it is. You can either be a member or non-member and go. I think it's the holiday white event. But, just to meet other women leaders within that industry. But yeah, whatever industry you're in, figure out, commercial real estate. Obviously, they've got, certain emerging leaders events, that kind of things. Commercial real estate's another great one for women. They're supporting and empowering women in that industry. So I would just kind of look at different industries you're in or want to be a part of that are promoting and empowering women specifically.
Great. All right. Well, I am not seeing any questions in the chat. So we must have just done such an incredible job of covering this topic from A to Z that no one has any more questions. But I think I've certainly learned a lot, and it's been wonderful talking with you both and trying to understand a little bit more about some of the solutions, especially that are out there for us. I will give it a left.
They're not putting you in the spot, but since we have time, is there anything else? Again, you're an amazing female leader, again, in a male-dominated industry, again, who I know has been through some different career trajectory on your end. Is there anything else you wanted to share?
You know, I would say really thinking outside the box for me, you know, being an accountant and being very regimented and thinking like, well, I majored in accounting and now I will be an accountant and this is what I will do for the rest of my life. It kind of just, it was the path, right? And it wasn't until, you know, a few years ago that I started to think differently and actually took a hiatus out of public accounting for 3 years and worked for a tech startup. So, you know, that was a whole different world and fun and interesting and kind of, you know, happy job, happy work, happy life, right? It was very much like, oh, this is fun. I'm learning interesting things. It's interacting with different kinds of people. And ultimately, of course, I found myself back here in public accounting. So clearly, to some degree, I am a lifer. But that for me was interesting. And to hear both of you kind of touch on, you know, look for the job you want, set the goals, talk about with your mentor how to get this specific job, whether it's a promotion that is on the horizon for you, or maybe a little bit of a career pivot. You know, I think that's important for people to hear that, you know, the job you have now may not be the exact right job for you forever. And there may be different pathways even within your current company that you didn't think about. You know, we talked about my previous company, we talked about, and instead of the career ladder, the career lattice, where you could kind of go up and you can kind of go over and learn different skills. And for me, that was sort of eye-opening because I hadn't thought that way for a long time. So it was, you know, it's good to hear you all sort of sharing those insights as well for our audience today. But thank you both, Kate and Christy, for the insightful discussion. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. We are planning our next Women in Business event for spring of 2026. So follow us on our social media channels and please reach out. Let us know what topics you're interested in for future webinars. And we will be following up with an email with a recording and some other information, as Kate mentioned, about the Women in Business event and a promo code for you all on that. And thank you all for joining. Have a great day.